Hello and welcome to the first Brock at the Buzzer podcast. This episode is called The Land is My Home. And what does that mean? Well, we'll get to that in your moments. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. Like I just said, my name is Brock Kowalski. I am 22 years old from Buffalo, New York. When it comes to my basketball acumen, I coached basketball for nearly 10 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. A 23-year-old coached basketball for 10 years. How does that make sense? Well, I had the great pleasure in coaching at the middle school, high school, and college levels. And why is that the case? Well, at an early, or right when I was born, I should say, not at an early age, right when I was born, the doctors diagnosed myself with cerebral palsy. And what that is a mental disorder that, in my case, affects my vision, hand-eye coordination, and the strength in the left side of my body. I mention those three in particular because you need those three to be an athlete. And unfortunately, I don't have those to my strengths. But one of my strengths is knowing about multiple different sports that we will get to in this podcast. From the NBA, that's my number one sport. I love the NBA. I love covering it. I love following it. That is why this podcast will be based on covering the Cleveland Cavaliers. The land is the nickname for Cleveland, if you guys aren't aware. But on this podcast, I will be covering also motorsports, which includes NASCAR, Formula One, that is becoming very popular in the United States, IndyCar, that opens this weekend in St. Petersburg, Florida, the Buffalo Sabres, obviously, because I am from Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills, of course, because I'm from Buffalo, and the Bills are just awesome, the New York Mets in Major League Baseball, in WWE as well, when pay-per-views come around. I've got a little tidbit of WWE news to cover at the end of the episode. But what is the ultimate goal of this channel? To help myself get my content, my views on the NBA in particular out there, because I want to be an NBA team writer when this is all said and done. Why? Because I want to travel, tweet, record podcasts much like this, and do interviews with coaches, players, front office personnel, and much more. And the team that I've chosen officially is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Why? Let me explain. The Cleveland Cavaliers are rising to an East powerhouse. Yes, you heard me correctly. The Cleveland Cavaliers are quickly becoming an Eastern Conference powerhouse, and here is why. First and foremost, yes, if you all saw the Hawks podcast I made last night, let me explain why I am no longer covering the Atlanta Hawks. To commit to an organization for just one player, Trae Young, to be excuse me, you're going to hear that every once in a while, a stutter. That is from my cerebral palsy, like I mentioned, so bear with me. But to commit to an organization, not only as a fan, but to cover the team on a daily basis, just like I want to do, and to commit to an organization just for one player, Trae Young, like I said, to be specific, in my opinion, after talking to some people that I'm close with, is just stupid. Okay? And that is because to constantly watch a guy like Trae Young, who is an elite talent, continue to lose night in and night out because he doesn't have the pieces he needs around him is very, very frustrating. And that's on the Hawks organization. I don't know where they're going. And that's a huge, huge question. But to cover an organization, because what they are doing as a whole, it's not necessarily revolving around a player, it's revolving around the general manager, the head coach, the supporting cast, the veterans on the team, the young players. That makes a hell of a lot more sense to cover a team like that than to cover a team for just one singular player. Speaking of the players, let's get into, I believe, is the next NBA's quote-unquote next big three. First and foremost, let's start with my guy, DG the PG, that is Darius Garland, for those of you unaware. This season, he is having a breakout season. Yes, he did just make his first NBA All-Star team. This year as a whole, Garland is averaging an impressive 20.3 points a game, also dishing out 8 assists and grabbing 3.3 rebounds per game. Garland, in my opinion, is the face of this franchise. Yes, over guys like Jared Allen, who we'll talk about later, and Evan Mobley, who we will also be talking about later. Garland is a guy who is becoming one of the NBA's elite young point guards, just like Luka Doncic, Ja Morant, and Trae Young. And I am not comparing Darius Garland to those three at all, because all of those guys have different styles of games. But I think Darius Garland, out of those three, if you count Garland, 4, is probably the most prototypical NBA point guard now. I mean, obviously, scoring is a major factor. He can hit from the outside. He can drive to the hole. He could pass and so on and so forth. Luka is just a freak of nature. Ja Morant is an athletic freak. And Trae Young is a three-point sniper. And Garland can do all of those. And that is what is going to make him so great. And by the way, Garland's defense has improved as the season has progressed. And that is nothing but great news for the Cleveland Cavaliers moving forward. Speaking of Jared Allen this year is averaging 16.2 points and 11 rebounds, also coming off his first NBA All-Star appearance as a replacement player for James Harden. I think he should have made it over Chris Middleton, but that is here nor there. I'm talking at first. I'm saying that Jared Allen should have made the team over Chris Middleton when the reserves were named about 2 weeks before the All-Star game. That's just my opinion. You can debate that in the comments. That's just my opinion on how good of a season that the Cavs' man in the middle is having for the surprise Cleveland Cavaliers. with that said, Jared Allen is living up to his full potential. It's still a head scratcher why the Brooklyn Nets gave him up in the Brooklyn Nets deal. Imagine if they had Jared Allen last year over, say, a DeAndre Jordan or LaMarcus Aldridge. There's no telling what they could have done last year, but that is here nor there. Allen is the backbone of one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. On the offensive end, Allen is a great screen setting big that allows him to free up not only himself on the pick and roll, but it also opens driving lanes for guys such as his point guard, Darius Garland, and newly acquired Karis LeVert, which makes the Cavs all that more dangerous. And now let's go to the rookie, Evan Mobley. This year he is averaging 14.9 points, 8.1 rebounds, and 2.6 assists a game this season. I believe Mobley is the runaway rookie of the year and is, much like his teammate Allen, one of the backbone players in, again, one of the NBA's best defensive teams in the Cleveland Cavaliers. Mobley is also proving he can do it all on both ends of the floor. From blocking shots to guarding ones, twos, threes, and fours defensively. From running the floor and beating everyone down the floor and just hammering it down, to the elite pick and roll connection that he does have with his point guard, Darius Garland, and so on and so forth. And Evan Mobley is just 20 years old, and that is unbelievable for the Cleveland Cavaliers moving forward. As I said before, the combination of Garland, Allen, and Mobley is quietly becoming the NBA's next big three, because in 2 or 3 years, all of those guys will be better. All of those guys will be all-stars. And this Cleveland Cavalier team will be set for many years to come. Now, another reason why this team is so damn good, sitting at an impressive 35-23, fourth in the Eastern Conference so far this season, is the Cavalier veterans. From guys like Kevin Love, Ricky Rubio before he was shipped out in the Karis LeVert deal, to Rajon Rondo, to Karis LeVert, to Jetty Osman, all have made huge contributions to the team's success this season, settling in their roles and understanding what they bring to the table, thanks in large part to the confidence given to them by, I believe, one of the NBA Coach of the Year candidates, or one of the top NBA Coach of the Year candidates, and Cavaliers headman, J.B. Bickerstaff. Speaking of J.B. Bickerstaff, let's talk about him for just a moment. And also talk about the president of basketball operations and general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Kobe Altman, as well. Both men have done an awesome job establishing a newfound culture and identity to the Cavalier organization. An identity that focuses on player development, togetherness, on and off the floor. Because if you watch a Cavs game and you watch the bench, this team is together like tied on a string, night in and night out. They're always rooting for one another. They always want one another to succeed, and quote unquote culture that has been overused for the past number of years, but in the Cavs case, it's true. And also another reason or another thing that I forgot to add into this little segment of the show here is this pair of Bickerstaff and Altman are willing to take risks. Okay, the Karis LeVert trade wasn't really a risk because you're giving up a first round pick, a second round pick, and an expiring contract in Ricky Rubio, who unfortunately is done for the season due to an ACL tear. But it is a chance when you're talking about who you take, who you extend moving forward in terms of Colin Sexton or Karis LeVert. And I think the option is pretty self-explanatory just on the fact that Sexton is done for the year on his Achilles injury, which basically gives the Cavs a free lane to say, Karis LeVert, you're the two of the right now, and you're the two of the future. More on LeVert here in a second. But back to this turnaround, this culture, this identity, this player development based twosome of Altman and Bickerstaff, this togetherness of this team. This identity has turned the Cavs into the League Pass darling of the season. What does that mean? Because the Cavs are not on national TV very much. In fact, how many national TV games have they had this year thus far? 0. Not one national TV game. Yes, Colby Altman said, I believe on Friday on the Woj Pod, it is a must listen. Check on Adrian Wojnarowski's Twitter, obviously at Woj ESPN. If you haven't listened to it, please listen to it. It's a great listen. The Cavs got flexed once on an ESPN game, but they're going to be on national TV come playoff time, and you all will see exactly what I'm referring to. Okay, the final topic in terms of the Cavs before we get to that small bit of WWE news that I have for you. What the Cavs need to do following the All-Star break, or I said in this case, must do following the All-Star break. And I started it off with this. It's time to start LeVert. I know by saying this, I know it may turn some Cavs fans against me, but to put it bluntly, Isaac Okoro, great young player, great defender. You know exactly what you're going to get from him night in and night out, but he does not provide the offensive firepower that Karis LeVert does. And the Cavs bench already is pretty good offensively, especially when you have guys like Kevin Love, Rajon Rondo, Jetty Osman, and so many others as well. And I think the Cavs bench has enough offensive depth where I think it's time to say, we have to try this. We have to try the lineup of Garland, LeVert, Allen, Mobley, and Markkanen. In fact, the three big lineup that has been so successful this year could be back together very, very soon as Lauri Markkanen is progressing from an ankle progressing smoothly in his recovery from an ankle injury he sustained before the All-Star break. So I think it is time to say, you know what, we need to try this out and see how it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You have the depth there that you can throw Okoro back in the lineup for defensive purposes, but LeVert can do damage on both ends of the floor. I think that's why he's been up and down, up and down, up and down to start his tenure in Cleveland. But I think it's time for J.B. Bickerstaff to finally pull the plug and say, Garris, you're starting tonight. And I think you could see it as soon as Thursday when the Cleveland Cavaliers take on the Detroit Pistons. Continue to play defense, or elite defense. The Cavs must continue to do what they have been doing all season long. That has propelled them to an impressive, like I mentioned before, 35-23 record, fourth in the East. This Cavs team wins their games on defense. They're not going to outscore somebody on most nights. They have to play defense, and they must continue to do that to maintain their impressive fourth seed in the East. I think they can, but it's going to be tough here in the second half because they do have some tough opponents moving forward. Speaking of opponents, beat the teams you are better than. Looking at the Cavs schedule, much like I did this morning when I made this rough draft that I'm reading off to you right now, is the Cavs have some winnable games against teams like Detroit, Washington, and the Indiana Pacers, but they also have some tough games ahead as well against teams like Toronto, Philadelphia. By then, I'd expect James Harden to play in that game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Denver Nuggets, obviously, because of Nikola Jokic, and the Chicago Bulls, who have been great all season long. But one advantage, all of the tough games the Cavs have left on their schedule all seem to fall at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, which is obviously an advantage. If you don't know what that is the Cleveland Cavaliers home gym, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So, speaking of games, like I mentioned before, the Cavs open their All-Star break, or their post-All-Star break schedule on Thursday against the Detroit Pistons at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bally Sports Ohio, and of course, NBA League Pass. That is not a great game, but if you want to see these Cavs play, that's a good game to watch because I expect to, especially after losing 2 games prior to the All-Star break, I expect the Cleveland Cavaliers to come out with a little fire, and I believe to start against the Detroit Pistons is the perfect way to come back off the All-Star break. And before I let you go, let me let you in on some WWE news. Now, pardon me, I'm just getting my thoughts straight here, but AJ Styles, you all should know who that is, especially if you follow the WWE. He's been a workhorse since he entered the company in 2016. And according to Fightful Select's Sean Ross Sapp, if you're a wrestling fan, I highly encourage you to follow Sean on Twitter because he's just great at what he does. But again, AJ Styles in the WWE have agreed to a quote-unquote mega deal or a contract extension that may see Styles make up as much as $3 million a year. Again, that is a rough estimate. That is also according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select. So that's the little tab of WWE news that I got this afternoon that I wanted to tack on to the end of the show. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please like the video, share the video, and subscribe. More Cavs content is coming your way. Again, the Cavs open their post-All-Star break schedule on Thursday against the Detroit Pistons at 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, you can catch the game on Bally Sports Ohio an NBA League Pass. With that said, y'all, I'll see you all very soon on the next edition of the Brock at the Buzzer podcast.